All right, so self-confidence. I mean, who couldn't use a bit more of
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
We've been going through this guide, 10 things you can do to boost your self-confidence. He sent it over, and wow, some of these ideas are, well, unexpected, to say the least.
Totally agree. It really digs into the why of confidence, not just the surface stuff you usually hear.
Yeah, exactly. Like, think about rejection. We usually try to avoid it at all costs.
Mm.
But this guide, it flips the script with this 100 Days of Rejection challenge. Have you ever heard of this thing?
Oh, it's wild, isn't it? It all comes from Jia Jing. He basically decided to make rejection his whole deal for 100 days.
Wait, seriously, what happened?
Well, some pretty amazing stuff, actually. He went from being terrified of putting himself out there to, get this, proposing to a woman he'd just met at a coffee shop.
You didn't. Did she say yes?
She didn't know. But that's not the point, really. The point is he retrained his brain to see rejection not as like a personal failure, but as a stepping stone, He learned to separate his self-worth from the outcome. That's huge for building confidence.
Wow, that's kind of brilliant when you think about it. Reminds me of that exposure therapy they use for phobias. You gradually face the thing you're scared of, and the fear lessens over time. So this challenge, it's kind of like exposure therapy, but for social rejection, right?
You got it. And what this guide points out is that by intentionally putting yourself out there, getting those no's, you develop, well, thicker skin, basically. You realize rejection isn't the end of the world. And that frees you up to take more risks in your personal life and work and everything.
That's so true. It's like you're building up an immunity to those self-defeating thoughts that creep in when we think about potential rejection.
Exactly. Now, the guide also talks about the power of shifting your focus outward. And this connects to another technique it talks about, helping others.
Okay, so how does helping others boost our own confidence? I mean, it feels good, but how does that translate into feeling more self-assured?
Well, it takes the spotlight off of us, off our own insecurities when we're focused on someone else, on making their life a little better.
It's true. It's like when you're feeling down on yourself and you do something nice for someone else, and suddenly your own problems don't feel so big.
Exactly. And there's actually a psychological link between altruism and higher self-esteem. It's the feeling you get when you make a difference. Plus, when you help others, you start to see yourself as someone who's capable, who cares, and that reinforces a positive self-image.
I've definitely felt that. Even if it's something challenging, volunteering my time always makes me feel more energized and confident. It's like you're proving something to yourself that you can handle it.
Yes. And that sense of capability, that's a key ingredient in self-confidence.
I'm seeing how all these ideas in this guide connect. So, embracing rejection, helping others, it also delves into visualization. Visualizing your ideal self, it calls it. What's the thinking there?
It all comes down to the power of our brains, really. Visualization, it's not just wishful thinking. It's about training your subconscious to work towards something you want.
So we're basically creating a mental picture of ourselves as we want to be instead of focusing on our insecurities.
That's it. And the guide actually has a simple exercise for this. It suggests spending just 10 seconds every day looking in the mirror and affirming a positive self-image.
10 seconds. That's it. But how does that even work? It's not like looking in the mirror and saying, I'm confident, magically makes it true.
No, it's not magic, but it does use the power of repetition and, well, kind of like self-suggestion. When you focus on positive things about yourself consistently, even if you don't totally believe it at first, you're creating new pathways in your brain. You're linking you with those good qualities.
Wow, that's so interesting. So we're changing our self-talk from negative to positive, and that changes how we act.
Exactly. How we see ourselves inside, it affects how we present ourselves to everyone else.
It's like that fake it till you make it idea. Not being fake, but actively choosing to embody the traits you want to have.
I like that. That's a good way to put it. It's about recognizing that our thoughts, our actions, they all have an impact.
This guide is full of such interesting ideas. What else does it have in store for us?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The guide says we should do something that many people might find a bit, well, daunting, to be honest. It says we should embrace discomfort.
Embrace discomfort. Okay, now that just sounds like a recipe for a panic attack, doesn't it? I mean, we're creatures of habit, right? We crave routine. We love our comfort zones.
True. Our brains are hardwired to seek out the familiar, avoid anything that seems risky. But, and here's the catch, you rarely grow inside that comfort zone. Think about it. Every time you've done something that stretched you, pushed you past what you thought you could handle, He came out the other side feeling better, more capable.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. It's like those uncomfortable situations. They're actually chances to kind of redefine what we think we can handle, right?
Yeah.
Prove something to ourselves.
Exactly. And the guide even gives some examples that are, relatable. It talks about things like dragging yourself out of bed at 6 a.m. for a run when you'd much rather sleep, or going dancing, putting yourself out there, even if you feel awkward on the dance floor.
And those little things, those baby steps outside your comfort zone, they add up. You start to think, hey, I did that. I can see how that would chip away at that inner voice that tells us we can't do things, that we're not good enough.
That's it. Exactly. And when that inner critic quiets down, there's space for the more confident you to come through.
That's a perfect transition to the next point, actually. Silencing that inner critic, that voice that loves to remind us of everything we've ever done wrong.
Oh, yeah. We all have that voice to some extent. It's like a constant stream of self-doubt and negativity.
So how do we shut it up? Sometimes it feels like it never stops.
The guide has a few ideas. First, it suggests consciously fighting those negative thoughts with positive affirmations, and not just cheesy slogans, but real, genuine statements about your strengths, your accomplishments, your progress.
So basically replacing that negative self-talk with a more realistic and positive one, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the second thing it talks about is self-compassion. Think about it. We're usually way harder on ourselves than we would ever be on a friend. So it's about treating yourself with the same kindness you'd give to someone you care about.
So true. We're often our own worst enemies, right? Instead of beating ourselves up over mistakes, maybe we can be more curious about them, use them to learn.
Exactly. Now, this next part is interesting. The guide says that instead of ignoring our flaws, we should actually confront them.
Let's be real. Who actually enjoys doing that? It's not exactly a fun way to spend an afternoon, is it?
No, it can be pretty uncomfortable to look at the areas where we fall short. But the thing is, when we admit those flaws, we can start to own them, and eventually we can grow from them.
So it's not about being perfect. It's about self-awareness and then actually doing something to improve.
Right. And the guide gives some practical examples. It talks about things like taking better care of your hygiene, eating healthier, being better with your time, small changes, but they all show a commitment to self-improvement, which is empowering.
Action. That's the key, right? Because often the things that make us feel insecure are the things we know we should be doing but aren't. It's that feeling of, I really should. But taking action, it's like we're taking that feeling of self-doubt and turning it into accomplishment.
You got it. Feeling in control is a huge part of building self-confidence. It's about realizing we have the power to change our lives. Now, the guide also talks about something that can really mess with our confidence. Those feelings of inferiority we get when we compare ourselves to others.
Oh, tell me about it. It's so easy to compare yourself to others, especially with social media and everything, and come up short.
It's human nature, really, that urge to compare. But this guide, it challenges us to think differently. It suggests that instead of thinking of those people as better than us, we remind ourselves that everyone has strengths and weaknesses, everyone has insecurities.
So we're all just on our own paths, right? Just because someone seems confident or successful doesn't mean they don't have their own struggles.
Exactly. And we have to remember that comparison can really distort things. We see the highlight reels of other people's lives, those perfect moments, but we don't see the work that went into it, the behind the scenes.
Don't compare your blooper reel to someone else's highlight reel. I love that saying.
It's so true. So instead of falling into that comparison trap, the guide says we should focus on ourselves, our own progress, our own good qualities, our own growth.
It's a good reminder. It's easy to get so caught up in what everyone else is doing that we forget to appreciate our own journeys.
Exactly. And speaking of unique paths, the guide also talks about the importance of finding the things that let us up inside, the things that make us feel energized and excited.
So finding our talents, our passions, right? What does that have to do with self-confidence?
Well, when we're doing things that use our natural strengths, that we're passionate about, something really cool happens. Psychologists call it flow.
Flow state. I've heard of that.
Yeah.
It's like being totally immersed in something you enjoy, to the point where you lose track of time. You're focused, energized, totally present.
Exactly. And being in that flow state has been linked to feeling happier, more fulfilled, and, yep, more confident.
I can see why. You're not stuck in your head, second-guessing yourself.
Mhm.
When you're in that flow state, you're just in the moment, totally engaged.
Right. And that feeling of mastery and accomplishment, it can be a huge confidence boost. It shows you what you're capable of.
Makes you wonder how much potential we all have locked away inside, just waiting to be tapped into, huh?
It really does. And the guide says exploring those talents doesn't have to be some big dramatic thing. It can be as simple as picking up a new hobby, taking a class, or even going back to something you loved as a kid.
It's like giving ourselves permission to have fun, to try things out, to rediscover parts of ourselves we might have forgotten about.
Yes. And who knows what you might find along the way.
Okay, so we've covered a lot. We talked about embracing being uncomfortable, quieting that inner critic, facing our flaws head on, remembering that everyone's struggling in their own way, and finding those things we're passionate about. This guide is full of great stuff.
It really is. Now, this next part might speak to anyone who's ever felt down on themselves about how they look, especially in today's world.
Oh, I think we've all been there. It's tough not to compare ourselves to others, especially these days.
For sure. So the guide has this really interesting and simple technique to combat those negative thoughts. It says that instead of focusing on what we don't like about how we look, we should try to find things we do like. It's true. It's so easy to get stuck in that negative loop.
So how do you actually shift that focus?
Yeah.
Especially with all these images of perfection surrounding us constantly.
It starts with noticing, you know? The guide actually has this challenge. Every time you look in the mirror, try to find one thing you genuinely like about how you look instead of zeroing in on what you don't like.
So it's about retraining our brains, consciously looking for things to compliment ourselves on, instead of always criticizing.
Yes. And the more you do it, the more your brain starts to automatically see the positive, you know? You're teaching yourself to see yourself through a kinder lens.
It's about self-acceptance, isn't it? Instead of self-criticism.
Exactly. And that can make such a difference in how you feel about yourself. When you feel good on the inside, it shows on the outside, too. It changes how you carry yourself, how you interact with people.
Confidence is the best outfit. Right.
Love that. And actually, speaking of outfits, this guide talks about how the way we dress can affect our confidence, too.
Makes sense. What we wear is a way of expressing ourselves, right?
Exactly. And the guide talks about how experimenting with different styles can be really powerful. It's about finding what makes you feel good, comfortable in your own skin.
So it's not about following trends. It's about finding what feels authentic to you.
Yes. And sometimes it's the little things, like trying a new hairstyle, wearing a bold color, adding a cool piece of jewelry. Those small changes can really make a difference.
It's about those details that make us feel good, you know?
Yeah.
Even if it's just for ourselves. And that can spill over into other areas of our lives, too.
Definitely. Confidence builds on itself. When you feel good, you're more likely to take chances, go after what you want.
It's amazing how connected all of this is, you know? From facing our fears to self-love to our sense of style, this guide has been so insightful.
It really has. And if there's one big takeaway, it's a building self-confidence. It's a journey, not a destination. It takes time, it takes work, and most importantly, it takes being kind to yourself.
I love that. It's a process, not a finish line.
That's it. It's about learning from everything you go through, the ups and the downs, and using that to become stronger, more resilient.
This has been such a great conversation. Any final words of wisdom you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
Just this. Believe in yourself. You have what it takes to create a life you love. Trust your gut, embrace what makes you unique, and never stop learning and growing.
So well said. This guide has given us a lot to think about. And to our listeners, if you're ready to start your own journey of building confidence, check out the 10 things you can do to boost your self-confidence guide. Remember, the first step is always the hardest, but the rewards are huge. Until next time, keep diving deep and keep believing in yourself.